selling a contract doesn't happen until the contract has been signed and the fee has been paid. So you have to think about it that way. When you structure this as a bonus instead of as a commission, that implies that a person is going to be doing something in excess of just selling in order to warrant that compensation. A bonus is you are doing something extra. So there's a certain level of minimum competency that you want to achieve for the person, certain minimum things they have to do every day. Salesperson, they have to log into the software every day, your CRM. They have to check the leads that are available there, and they have to engage with them in some way. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. Where on today's episode, we are continuing our series about non-attorney salespeople. And today we're going to talk about how to compensate them. So just a little word before we get started. This series that we are doing has come at the request of our community because a lot of lawyers are struggling with the idea of a non-attorney salesperson and how to ethically, appropriately, and profitably have them installed in your law firm. And so we're going to talk about that at very high level, right? And by high level, I mean that a lot of the strategies, the tactics, the tools, the calculators, things like that are things that we're actually going to be going into a lot of depth about, but that is not the time that we have available on this podcast. So if you want to learn more about this topic, you want to get into the weeds and you want to actually do the math on how to hire your person, how to compensate your person, how to figure out if you can afford your person, because a non-attorney is not billing attorney hours and dollars. And so how do we pay for them, right? All of those things we're actually going to talk about in quite a bit of detail at the upcoming retreat that we have coming up in September. This is our second live retreat of the year, and it is lead flow to cash flow. Okay. That means we're talking about marketing and sales, and it is the Law Firm Mentors Marketing and Sales Summit. We're going to teach you how to turn clicks into clients and how to turn conversations into contracts. Okay. Clicks into clients, that's our marketing piece. Conversations into contracts, that's our sales piece. So if you want to get more details on this and you actually want to do the work with us in person, you can check out information. We are going to be in New Orleans, right? Good old Nolans. I think that's how some people like to say it. The city of sin, or some other colloquialisms I'll probably hold for myself because this is somewhat of a PG-13 show. But New Orleans is going to be a great time, and we're going to give you a lot of great value. So if you want to check out the summit that is coming up, the Marketing and Sales Summit here for Law Firm Mentor, just go to our website, lawfirmmentor.net, to learn more information. We're happy to share that with you. And if you are checking us out here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. We want to see you on a regular basis because we give out a lot of information here talking about the business of law. And we are committed to helping law firm owners to grow their revenues, crush chaos in business, and make more money. And today, that making more money piece, we're going to be covering in the world of our non-attorney salesperson talk. So let's dive into it. So on our last episode, we actually talked about hiring the right non-attorney salespeople and some of the things that you have to be mindful of when hiring this role in a law firm that's a little bit different than hiring some of the other roles. It has greater ramifications for both your profit margin, but also your risk margin. So it's important that if you haven't already seen that episode, go check that out here on our channel on YouTube. And of course, we're also on all the podcast platforms. So you can check us out there as well. But today, we're going to be talking about one of the hotly requested topics. I probably hear a request for this topic in our Essentials Plus community. That is our Law Firm Mentor membership, probably at least once a week. People are always asking this question because they have to get their mind around how this is something that they can work into their model of business in a way that won't break the bank. And this is talking about compensation, right? So we talk about compensation in a whole host of different areas, but when we talk about it relative to a non-attorney, I think some of the eyes glaze over. A lot of folks get really scared. And I think that is because of the very first thing we're going to talk about. I'm talking about 3 key strategies about compensation today when we talk about compensating your non-attorney. But there is one biggie, and the very first one is that one, which is how to avoid an ethics problem in compensating your non-attorney. So we know that there are 2 jurisdictions presently, Utah and Arizona, that will allow for law firms to be owned by non-attorneys. And as a result, they will allow for fee sharing between attorneys and non-attorneys. However, every other jurisdiction still prohibits it. And I think for a longer period of time than people might believe, lawyers are protecting our industry by not allowing non-attorneys to invest their interest in what is a profession that requires us to prioritize our clients' interests. Okay. But right now, for most of you, you are not allowed to share your fees with a non-attorney, at least not in most scenarios. Now, there are 3 exceptions to that rule. Okay. So I will first reference the ethics rule. I'm going to talk about the ABA rule because we have clients and prospects in just about every state in the United States. But if you look at ABA Model Rule 5.4a, this deals with the professional independence of a lawyer, and it precludes us from being able to share our fees with non-attorneys. And so people have said, well, don't we have some exceptions to that? I will tell you the exceptions do not cover non-attorney salespeople. Okay. So there's an exception for paying out to a deceased lawyer's estate. So if you are in practice with a lawyer and that lawyer dies and that lawyer was entitled to compensation, you can pay that compensation to someone other than the lawyer. You can pay it to their estate. You can also share fees with non-lawyer employees in the context of profit sharing plans, right? So law firm can generate fees in excess of what is needed to run the law firm. Hopefully that's the goal, right? We all want to be in business to make profit. That profit can be shared with your attorneys and as well as your non-attorneys. And then finally, nonprofits. So there are rules for sharing fees with nonprofits. But outside of that, compensating a non-attorney salesperson, can't do it. At least not in the direct sense of taking a clip of a sale and sharing it with a non-attorney. Now, this is important because when you think about the price margin, the price point at which most legal services are offered, most salespeople who sell things at that price point, think people who sell cars, people who sell high-end jewelry, people who sell entertainment packages, right? When you're used to selling something that is $5,000 or more, a higher end service, then a lot of those services in other industries have a basic model that takes care of both risk and reward on the side of the salesperson, as well as risk and reward on the side of the business owner. And that is your typical base plus commission sales structure, right? Or comp structure. So if I was hiring a salesperson to sell diamond earrings in my jewelry store, I could say, I'm going to give you a base of $40,000 a year with a target compensation of $150,000 a year. And the difference between the two, $90,000, right? Did I do that math right? I probably did that math wrong because math off the top of my head is not my thing. But let's say 40,000 to 150. That's 110. Okay. We need an extra $110,000 if you're going to pay someone a base of 40 and their target comp for the year is 150. We need an extra 110,000. Well, where's that going to come from? In most businesses, that comes from commission. So if you sell a $5,000 piece of jewelry, you get 10% of that, or you get 5% of that. Whatever the percentage is based on the volume of sales that are expected, you get some percentage of what you sell as a commission. And those commissions then will add up to an extra however many dollars, in this instance, 110, to get you to that target compensation of 150. Right? Pretty easy math. And that takes care of risk and reward on both sides, because for the salesperson, the risk is if you pay me a low salary, I can't eat, right? If I'm expecting to make 150 and I set my lifestyle on 150, I have got to make those sales, right? So I have some risk that I won't eat until I make sales, right? That's why you give them a low salary so they can still exist. But then I have the reward of there's no cap, right? I could sell up to 110. I could sell up to 200. You would want me to sell enough jewelry that I get 200 in commission. I would want me to sell enough jewelry that I get 200,000 in commission, right? So it's a win-win. And on the business owner side, the risk is mitigated by paying a lower salary. If I pay you a higher salary and you don't ever perform, then I'm out all this money based on what you were not able to deliver. I would just be taking your representation that you can deliver on a wing and a prayer that you can. But I also get reward in that I am happy to pay you a clip of what you sell because that means you're selling something, right? So whatever the percentage is of what I'm giving you, I'm still getting the balance of what's left over after you get your percentage. So I also get risk and reward taken care of. And that's why base plus commission models are so common and so popular in sales jobs. The problem in our context in the law is that we don't have the ability to do that. So then how do you compensate them? So what we usually shift to instead of commissions is bonuses, right? And bonuses are paid in excess of performance, right? So there's a certain standard of performance. Typically, their base salary is going to cover that level of performance. That's why you don't usually have a very low base salary when you're talking about compensating a law firm salesperson, because there's a certain high level of activity that's going to be required, especially in a smaller law firm, that is going to take them out of the realm of just selling. They're going to be selling, but they're also going to be relationship oriented. Typically, this role is structured as one of customer service plus sales service. So I'm selling you, but I'm also ensuring that I hand you over in an appropriate way to whatever legal professional is going to handle your case. And I make sure that you remain happy so that I can either sell you something in the future or so that the lawyer who is handling your case can sell you something in the future, or so that if you need another legal service in the future or a friend who needs a legal service, you will send them back here. That typically happens at the level of sales. So when the salesperson is taking on not just selling, but also relationship mining, relationship maintenance, right? Keeping additional sales coming in through the pipeline. Oftentimes that requires a higher level base salary because the things that they are doing in the ordinary course of business that will, yes, positively affect your bottom line, but not in the direct way that in this moment when they are maintaining a relationship with Susie, they are selling to Susie. Not all of that role is sales 100% of the time. That justifies a higher salary. But even with the higher salary, there still is the idea that there's still an opportunity for more. So how do you get to the more? Well, you're typically going to do that through bonuses, okay? And you want to tie those bonuses to collected dollars, not to signed retainer agreements. Because as with bonuses that you pay or commissions that you pay, however you characterize it, when you're paying out compensation to lawyers, you don't want the doing of the thing to be rewarded. You want the outcome of the thing to be rewarded, right? So just as a lawyer putting 5 hours into your software as billable time, if they're billing that to a person they know is insolvent, who's just filed for bankruptcy, well, that doesn't benefit you, right? You're not getting anything out of that. Putting hours into the software doesn't mean anything until those hours are passed along to somebody who has an expectation and a plan to pay for it, right? And those dollars come in. So it's the same thing with sales, right? Selling a contract doesn't happen until the contract has been signed and the fee has been paid. Okay. So you have to think about it that way. Now, when you structure this as a bonus instead of as a commission, that implies that a person is going to be doing something in excess of just selling in order to warrant that compensation, right? A bonus is you are doing something extra. So there's a certain level of minimum competency that you want to achieve for the person. Certain minimum things they have to do every day, right? Salesperson, they have to log into the software every day, your CRM. They have to check the leads that are available there and they have to engage with them in some way. What level of engagement is going to depend on whether they are also doing intake or intake is separated. We talked about that in our first episode when we talked about hiring your non-attorney. That needs to be clear when you hire them. But usually the salesperson is going to have some level of sales conversation and some level of follow-up, right? Typically, you're going to structure it in such a way that your salesperson is actually doing follow-up, not simply your salesperson is going to be selling, and if the sale doesn't happen, lawyer follows up. Because again, you're creating and curating relationship between your salesperson and this prospective new client who you want to become a client. Okay. The other thing you want to think about is you want dollars to be the mechanism for measuring the extent of the bonus. So bonus can be tied to your conversion rate. So you can say, if you convert a certain percentage of people in a course of a week, in a course of a month, in a course of a quarter, whatever your metric is going to be, I would say usually you want to do it at least by the month. because at some point that monthly revenue is going to be calculated in a current month and then paid out in a subsequent month. So you can get them to a certain high level of consistent income, right? You don't want it to be kind of a feast or famine where they're, kind of up and down, which is, by the way, more likely to happen with commission income than bonus income. That's a selling point that you can talk about when you talk to your non-attorney salespeople prospects about what the role entails. But you want to have them get to a place where they're consistently bringing in a certain amount. So tying their bonuses to their conversion rate does not directly affect any given client. You're not saying if you sell Susie, you get a percentage of what Susie pays. You're saying your job is to sell. And to the extent that you are selling, doesn't matter who you're selling to, and the percentage of people that you're selling, right? If I give you 3 leads and you convert 2 of those leads, you're at 67% conversion. If I give you 20 leads and you convert 10 of those leads, you're at 50% conversion rate. The percentage of conversion rate metric does not require a certain number of people to be sold to, does not require that you sell to any given person. And it's not calculated based on the dollars and cents that came in, right? So normally you would just figure out what the bonus is for a conversion rate. And again, you want the bonus to be tied to excess performance. So if you as a law firm are converting at 40% and you hire a salesperson, the salesperson should be able to expect reasonably with a basic level of training to be able to sell at 40%. In excess of 40% is when we get into bonus territory. Now, if you already have a very high conversion rate, and you need to calculate your firm's conversion rate on both cold traffic and warm traffic, if you already have a very high conversion rate, it would be unfair to expect that you're going to pay someone a low salary and bonus them to get them up to a higher rate of compensation, only to give them a conversion rate to start with that is astronomically high, right? So if you're at 80% conversion rate on all traffic, okay, not very likely, but just saying, okay, you're at 80% conversion rate on all traffic, and you say to them, hey, you're required to convert at 80% as a part of your salary, and then you'll get a bonus when you are over 80%. Wow, that's a pretty high number to boast, right? To best. It is very challenging for someone to even contemplate being able to do that, which means the salary is pretty much the salary. Bonuses then become a question mark. If you really want to get them into the habit and the pattern and practice of, it's not a question mark that I'm going to earn this, here's where I'm starting, but I know I'm going to be able to exceed that, then you have to give them the opportunity to exceed that, which means you have to give them training, development, ongoing. We're going to talk about non-attorney salesperson training in our next episode, number 3. But just keep in mind, as you're thinking about this bonus structure, that it really has to be tied to how they are going to ultimately increase for your firm, right? Because the idea is this person is replacing whoever is currently selling. Could be the owner, could be another attorney, could be a paralegal, doesn't matter. But whomever that person is who's being replaced is presumably going to be able to do other things that will increase economic value. So if you think about affording the non-attorney salesperson from the perspective of, if I get my 10 hours a week back that I'm not selling, if you are a sole owner, you're probably going to put that into billing, right? Maybe some of it goes into billing, some of it goes into marketing. But let's say you've got 10 hours you get back. Your non-attorney salesperson is going to conduct 5 sales a week. Those 5 sales a week are likely to get you 10 hours back, because you would have had to read the intake notes, go to the sales conversation, maybe some follow-up, prepare the retainer, wait for the fees to come in, etc. Right? So let's say it's 10 hours you get back. Well, if you're billing at $500 an hour and 8 of those 10 hours now go into billing, well, you've just made $4,000, right? That's $4,000 a week. So unless you tell me you're going to be paying, let's take 52 weeks, $4,000 a week. And yes, I'm doing this on the calculator as we sit here. Unless you tell me you're going to pay this person $208,000, we're using gross numbers. We're not talking taxes. I realize that's not the right number, but just doing the math, right? If $208,000 is what you're going to be able to produce in billing, let's say you have even a 75% collection rate. God, I hope you have a better collection rate than that. But let's say it's 75%. It's $156,000. You're probably not, as a sole owner of a law firm with no other attorneys, going to have your non-attorney salesperson start out at $156,000. Yeah, right person, you may, but you're probably not. So if that's what you're going to be able to go do, then just by virtue of hiring the person, you can afford them, right? By virtue, if nothing else, they don't have to do anything. They don't have to produce anything. But in the meantime, you expect them to at least produce what you were producing. But here's the beautiful thing. Non-attorney salespeople can typically produce a lot more because you were only doing 10 sales a week. They're more likely to be able to close at a higher rate if you hire the right salesperson. They're more likely to have more time in the week, right? So there are times where you were not able to schedule a consult this week. You couldn't schedule them until next week, by which time that person may have met with another attorney. Or a person may have simply declined to schedule because you weren't able to see them because you're so busy as your sole owner self. So there's a whole lot of reasons why those numbers tend to go up. And again, we're going to go into the nitty gritty of how to calculate the right time and the right mathematical equation for you hiring your non-attorney salesperson when we are at the Marketing and Sales Summit by LFM in September. But for right now, you can know that minimally speaking, bonus structure is going to be a viable strategy for you. Now, your target compensation, right, to figure out what your bonus needs to be comprised of. Because if we say it's not base plus commission, it's base plus bonus, you still are trying to get to the target compensation, which is how much they can expect to earn in a year. And that, I would normally say, go to the OES data, the Occupational and Employment Study that's conducted by the census, so that you can see what salespeople are making in your region, selling something of comparable value to what you sell. So I gave a couple examples earlier, jewelry, cars, but there are other things that people sell. Think about what people sell that is a comparable service to your service, and then think about what those people earn. Go look that up. And then that can tell you some ranges of target comp. And you can get, again, the OES data has your median, your mean, and then 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile. Think about who you're hiring. Are you hiring somebody who's late in the game, has been doing it for 30 years? Or are you hiring somebody who's fresh out of the gate? Either way, you want to choose the percentage that's most appropriate to that. And that can give you some cues as to how to set the comp. All right. The next thing I want to talk about when we talk about compensating your non-attorney is that you want to incentivize behavior and not outcome. Now, I know you're thinking, hey, wait a minute. Just a minute ago, you said we are focused on outcome. We are not focused just on doing, right? So I gave the example of the billing attorney, right? You don't want to just say, hey, putting in your billable hours, you get X dollars. Because if they're putting in hours that no one is ever going to pay for, then at some point it's like, okay, you're putting in hours that doesn't really help me to achieve the outcome. So yes, there is a productivity requirement. You want people to do not just work of doing. You want that work to be valuable work that is actually going to generate an outcome for you. But when we talk about incentives, you want to incentivize behavior and not outcome. Now, when you decide what behavior you're going to incentivize, you're going to have to think about what is statistically likely to lead to the outcome you desire. So think about it this way. If there's a certain amount of follow-up that is going to lead to a close, right? And by the way, this is the reason why tracking is so important, both before and after you hire your non-attorney, because you should be able to say, we meet with 25 people in the course of a month. Of those 25 people, actually, let me use a flatter number so I can do some easy math, right? Because I said, easy statistical projections and percentages off the top of my head is not my thing. Okay. Let's say 30 people. You meet with 30 people a month. And on average of those 30 people, you're going to close 20 of them, right? So 2/3. If you close 67%, 20 out of 30 people, then those 20 people are going to pay you some average amount of money. Some cases might be higher. Some cases might be lower. You might sell several different case types, but let's say on average, $5,000 is what a sale is for you. And let's say that this is a retainer. Okay. Let's say it's not a flat fee. If you are charging people a $5,000 retainer and you sell 20 retainers in the course of a month, well, what is that? That's $100,000, right? Right. I had to do the math, right? It takes me a minute, right? You sold 20 people. You sold them at $5,000 service and you sold them one time, right? So that's $1.2 million over the course of a year. That's $100,000 a month. Now, if you think about this from a incentive perspective, of those 20 sales that were made in the course of a month, they probably weren't all a one call close, right? The one call close is I schedule an appointment on Monday to see you on Wednesday. Wednesday, you walk in. Wednesday, you walk out as a client. Okay. That's great. We love it when that happens, but statistically, that is not how most businesses are making sales of high cost services. Okay. A higher expense service typically is going to have some percentage that happen right away, depending on the urgency of your legal, whatever the legal services that you offer. Some people might say, oh yeah, absolutely. My kid's in jail. I'm here. I need an attorney, right? Other people might come in and say, hey, my child has been with me for 15 years and I'm now ready to go through the adoption process. They probably don't have the same level of urgency, right? So it might take you a meeting on Wednesday, following up Thursday, following up Friday, following up Saturday. It might require you to follow up 2 or 3 times a week over the next month before that person actually becomes a client. So even though you are closing on average 20 out of 30, out of those 20, you probably have some people close in this month. That's where, as I'm recording this is the month of July of 2025. You probably have some July 2025 clients who actually came from a pipeline that started in May of 2025. And you probably had some of those 10 prospects that you met with that didn't close this month in the month of July 2025 that might not close until September of 2025, right? They might require more time, more cultivation. Some of them aren't going to close at all, but some of the ones that do close might not close right away. This is all talking about averages. Again, the reason why tracking is so necessary and so important and must be a component of every salesperson's role, right? You need to have this both in your intake and in your sales responsibilities. But when we are talking about the idea of incentivizing behavior, you want them to be incentivized for that follow-up, because if the follow-up happens, then your math, right? Those averages, those tracking metrics that you have now conglomerated should tell you on average, when we follow up, we are able to close another 15% of the people who came in initially down the road. And if you're talking about 30 people that you're meeting with on average every month, another 15% is what's that? Another 4 people? Well, 4 people at $5,000 per service sell on average, it's another 20 grand, right? Most law firms would not say, I don't really care about another 20 grand, right? Most of us would say, yeah, I'm paying this person less than 20 grand. If I secure that extra 20 grand by requiring follow-up and they do the follow-up, even if they don't get any better at the follow-up than our numbers are telling us right now we're able to do, we're going to make more money, right? And here's the beautiful thing. When you get to a really good salesperson, you aren't just going to be taking your firm metrics that existed when you hired them and applying them to the salesperson. You're going to be driving all those numbers up, right? So we spend a certain number of hours per week engaged in the activity of sales, right? Meeting with people, following up, sending retainer agreements, collecting fees. We're going to have that much more time. So now instead of 20 hours a week doing that, it's going to be 40 hours a week doing that, because this person is going to be a full-time employee. When we are in the throes of hiring our salesperson, we might be converting 50% of the people who call through intake, and then 50% of the people who meet for sales leads, to have that sales conversation, become clients. Well, when we have a full-time dedicated salesperson, let's say intake is the same, 50%, but then instead of 50%, it becomes 60%. And maybe salesperson gets it up to 65%. So when you think about that, if you just, go back to our example from before, if we have 30 people that we meet with in the course of a month, well, if you're only converting at 50%, you're converting 15 new clients. If you're converting at 16%, you're up to 18 new clients. And if you're up to 65%, you're at 19 and a half. Let's round up. 20 clients, right? Well, the difference between 20 clients and 15 clients is 5 clients. 5 clients at $5,000 a client, that's an extra 25 grand just by hiring your salesperson and requiring a little bit more. Okay. And by the way, when I say requiring a little bit more, I don't think you should start with the idea of saying, hey, salesperson, I'm hiring you. You have to be better than us, right? The idea is I'm outsourcing this job. That's where you want to start. However good I am at this, I expect and require that you be as good. However, compensation, benefit, bonus, thriving in career happens when you get better than us. And that happens through training, which we're going to talk about in our next episode. All right, everyone. You have been watching the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, our series on non-attorney salespeople. I'm Allison Williams, your host, and I will see you on our next episode.